What is the purpose of a God who watches a child burn alive beneath collapsing buildings and does nothing? What is the purpose of a God who listens to mothers begging for mercy inside overcrowded hospitals, while machines slowly announce the end of another life? What is the purpose of a God who silently observes abuse, starvation, depression, addiction, suicide, loneliness, genocide, and the slow psychological erosion of entire civilizations, yet never intervenes? Because in the end, the most uncomfortable question is not whether God exists. The real question is far more disturbing. What practical difference exists between an absent God and no God at all? If no voice answers when someone loses everything, then perhaps humanity has been abandoned from the beginning. Perhaps the silence was always there. Perhaps every prayer ever spoken disappeared into the same indifferent void that swallows dying stars. And this is where the real conflict begins. Without God, what prevents morality from becoming convenience? Does good still possess meaning when nobody is watching? Is compassion something sacred? Or merely a biological strategy developed by social creatures trying to survive? Is hope a virtue? Or a neurological defense mechanism designed to stop conscious beings from collapsing beneath the weight of mortality? Because nobody remains psychologically unchanged after confronting this deeply. No human being comfortably accepts the idea that every memory will eventually vanish, that one day their name will no longer be spoken, that every person they love is slowly moving toward extinction. And even worse, without any certainty of reunion, justice, transcendence, or continuation. Still, people continue loving. They continue making promises. They continue burying their dead and somehow finding enough strength to wake up the next morning. But why? What sustains conscious existence when no eternal reward waits at the end? What keeps a person moving when the universe itself appears spiritually empty? Perhaps the most terrifying part of life is not suffering. Perhaps it is learning how to face life and death inside a universe where nobody is coming to save us. Entire civilizations were constructed upon a single conviction: someone was in control. No matter how brutal existence became, how unfair reality appeared, or how much suffering passed through human life, one certainty remained at the center of collective consciousness: nothing was random. Everything obeyed a higher order, even when that order seemed impossible to understand. That belief sustained empires, funerals, wars, marriages, rituals, sacrifices, and entire moral systems for centuries. It allowed people to endure plagues, famine, grief, and the terrifying unpredictability of existence because beneath the chaos, there was supposedly meaning, a structure, a hidden intelligence, a cosmic witness. Then humanity began asking a question too dangerous to ignore. What if nobody is there? This was precisely what Nietzsche perceived before almost everyone else. In the metaphor of the madman, a man runs through a crowded marketplace carrying a lantern in broad daylight while screaming desperately, "I seek God! I seek God!" The crowd laughs until he finally announces, "God is dead, and we have killed him." The sentence became famous because almost nobody understood its true horror. Nietzsche was not claiming that a literal divine being had physically died. He was describing something infinitely more catastrophic. Western civilization had destroyed its own absolute source of meaning, and still had not understood the consequences. Because removing God does not simply mean abandoning religion. It means losing the final foundation of morality, of truth, of metaphysical order, of objective meaning, of hope itself. And the most disturbing part is this: humanity dismantled these structures without being psychologically prepared to survive without them. The madman eventually asks, "Are we not wandering through an infinite nothing?" That may be one of the most terrifying lines ever written in philosophy. Because after the idea of an absolute plan disappears, humanity stands alone before existence for the first time. Not symbolically, literally. The sky becomes empty, prayer becomes echo, morality becomes negotiation, death becomes final. And suddenly every human being is forced to confront a possibility previous civilizations spent thousands of years trying to suppress. Perhaps the universe was never designed with us in mind. Perhaps consciousness emerged accidentally inside a cold cosmos incapable of love. Perhaps spiritual longing itself is evidence not of transcendence, but of deprivation. The thirst for meaning does not prove meaning exists. A starving creature also dreams of food. That is the terror Nietzsche uncovered. Not atheism, not science, not rebellion. The terror was realizing that once transcendence collapses, human beings must either create meaning artificially or stare directly into the abyss without blinking. Why does the human mind desire peace, yet continuously create war? Why does someone finally achieve the dream they spent decades pursuing and still return to emptiness shortly afterward? Why does pleasure fade so quickly? Why do even happy people secretly carry anxiety, dissatisfaction, paranoia, loneliness, and fear? Julius Bunsen believed these questions revealed something far deeper than ordinary psychological suffering. They revealed the contradictory structure of existence itself. While many philosophers searched for harmony, order, divine logic, or some ultimate balance hidden beneath reality, Bunsen moved in the opposite direction. For him, existence does not move toward resolution. No invisible force organizes human conflict into some higher reconciliation. Contradiction is not a flaw in life. It is the essence of life. Human beings crave permanence inside a world where everything decays. They seek certainty inside a reality built from unpredictability. They pursue lasting fulfillment through desires that begin disappearing almost immediately after being satisfied. And perhaps the cruelest aspect of all is this: the human mind recognizes this incoherence, yet remains trapped inside it. Bunsen saw human will as fragmented against itself. We desire incompatible things simultaneously: freedom and security, intensity and stability, isolation and intimacy, change and permanence, meaning and comfort, truth and illusion, never fully satisfied, never fully reconciled. That is why human existence produces constant tension. Not because humanity is spiritually impure, not because people are failing morally, not because enlightenment has not yet been achieved, but because consciousness itself is internally divided. Even spirituality often becomes another contradiction. People pray while doubting, worship while fearing abandonment, seek transcendence while remaining biologically chained to instinct, ego, lust, envy, and terror. The human being is a creature capable of imagining eternity while simultaneously panicking over social rejection. A species capable of composing sacred music while building concentration camps. Capable of tenderness and cruelty within the same afternoon. Perhaps the most uncomfortable form of lucidity is not accepting mortality. Perhaps it is accepting that the self is fundamentally unstable, disordered, contradictory, half-rational, often self-destructive. Not as an insult, not as pathology, but as the natural condition of conscious life, trying to extract coherence from a reality that may never have possessed coherence in the first place. And maybe this explains why silence terrifies people so deeply. Because in silence, contradiction becomes audible. Without God, the idea of a guaranteed moral order collapses. Without predetermined essence, no human being is born destined to become something specific. Without destiny, every decision stops being a detail and becomes part of the construction of identity itself. That changes the weight of existence completely. Because in this scenario, nobody comes to save us. No invisible force automatically corrects human mistakes. No absolute structure perfectly separates good from evil. Each individual becomes entirely responsible for their choices, values, actions, and the consequences they impose upon the world. And perhaps that is exactly what most people spend their lives trying to avoid. Total responsibility frightens many people more than death itself. It is psychologically easier to believe life already possesses a predefined direction than to accept that nearly everything depends upon fragile decisions made by confused, contradictory, finite human beings. But reality remains indifferent to psychological comfort. Every choice shapes character. Every omission does too. Every repeated action slowly constructs the person someone eventually becomes. Inside a universe without script, every human being becomes the author of their own existence. And authors receive no final answers, only possibilities, and the unbearable responsibility of choosing between them. This is where existential anguish begins, not in suffering alone, but in freedom. Because freedom sounds beautiful until someone realizes there is no ultimate authority capable of guaranteeing they chose correctly. There is no celestial confirmation, no cosmic applause, no metaphysical certainty, only consequences. A person chooses who to love, what to sacrifice, what to betray, what kind of conscience they can tolerate carrying. And after enough time passes, those choices become identity. That is why meaning becomes terrifying in a godless universe. Not because meaning disappears automatically, but because human beings become responsible for creating it themselves. And many people secretly suspect they are not strong enough for that burden. Perhaps this is why modern life is saturated with distraction, noise, entertainment, consumption, constant stimulation. Because silence forces confrontation. And confrontation forces the individual to face the possibility that existence possesses no hidden script at all. Only time, only decay, only consciousness temporarily observing itself before vanishing. No human being survives sustained entirely by facts. The human mind constantly transforms existence into meaning, even when it knows that meaning is fragile, temporary, symbolic, and often invented. Perhaps that is exactly why people continue writing poetry on a dying planet. Why they continue falling in love despite knowing every relationship eventually ends through separation, betrayal, or death. Why they still promise forever inside a universe where nothing remains. Human beings create small illusions to make reality emotionally survivable. And illusion here does not mean cheap deception. It means symbolic construction. Love is one. Art too, memory, faith, sacrifice, responsibility, ritual, even identity itself. None of these things alter the indifferent structure of the cosmos, but all of them profoundly alter the human experience inside it. A song cannot stop death. A painting cannot interrupt time. A prayer cannot reverse entropy. An embrace cannot eliminate finitude. Still, these experiences produce something strange, enough subjective meaning for consciousness to remain psychologically functional. Perhaps existential maturity means understanding this without becoming cynical, because many people destroy themselves searching for absolute, eternal, universal meaning capable of justifying existence permanently. And perhaps life never operated on that scale. Perhaps meaning only exists in fragments, conversations, memories, moments of tenderness, a hand held during grief, the warmth of another person beside you while both of you slowly move toward death. Tiny moments that do not save the universe, but temporarily save a human consciousness from collapsing into total emptiness. Even spirituality may function this way, not necessarily as objective certainty, but as symbolic resistance against despair. Candles lit in cosmic darkness, ancient rituals performed by fragile beings terrified of annihilation. mysticism emerging from the unbearable tension between mortality and longing. Maybe religions survived for thousands of years not because humanity was stupid, but because suffering creatures instinctively search for metaphysical shelter. Because a completely disenchanted universe is psychologically brutal. Deep down, almost every human life is constructed upon carefully cultivated micro-illusions, resisting the violence of reality. And perhaps the most astonishing thing is this: even knowing they are temporary, we still need them. Memento mori. The Stoics repeated this constantly because they understood something most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. Death does not reduce the value of life. Death creates value. Remembering mortality produces lucidity. Petty conflicts lose importance. Vanity weakens. Time stops appearing infinite. Suddenly, simple things recover depth. An embrace, a genuine friendship, a song heard at dusk, the smell of rain, the silence of a forest, waves breaking against ancient stones. The almost unbearable beauty of nature existing without concern for humanity. None of these experiences would feel emotionally precious if they lasted forever. Rarity creates intensity. Impermanence creates sacredness. Perhaps that is why human beings suffer so deeply before death. Because everything possessing real emotional value is condemned to disappear. Memories decay, bodies weaken, parents vanish, children grow distant, entire civilizations collapse into dust. Moments pass without possibility of return. And still, despite knowing all of this, humanity continues creating meaning inside fragility. We continue photographing moments, writing books, planting trees, making promises, loving mortal people exactly like ourselves. Perhaps the universe was never made for us. Perhaps no cosmic justice exists. Perhaps nobody is listening. Perhaps every prayer dissolves into silence. Still, we love, we grieve, we create, we resist. And perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of human existence is exactly this: the ability to find beauty while fully aware that everything ends. Because maybe courage is not believing eternity awaits us. Maybe courage is continuing to love despite knowing oblivion waits for everyone. A conscious being staring directly at mortality and choosing tenderness anyway. Perhaps that is the closest thing to transcendence humanity will ever have. If these videos make you feel less alone in your questions, fears, or silence, then you already understand why this channel exists. There are more than 100 videos here exploring nihilism, philosophy, consciousness, suffering, death, meaning, and the strange weight of being human. And every single view, comment, and share genuinely helps keep this project alive. If you want to go deeper, consider becoming a member. You'll support the channel directly and gain access to exclusive content, early videos, and a closer connection to this community of people searching for something real in a world that often feels empty. And if a video truly moved you, you can also use super thanks. It's a simple gesture, but it helps more than you probably realize. Still, honestly, just being here already means a lot.